But my imagining this old man meditatively fondling his long-neglected tefillin was so much sentimental kitsch, really. A scene out of some Jewish parody of Wild Strawberry. How my father actually disposed of the tefillin reveals an imagination altogether bolder and more mysterious, inspired by a personalized symbolic mythology as eccentric as Beckett's or Gogel's. Who'd you give the tefillin to? I asked. Who? Nobody. You threw them out in the trash? No, of course I didn't. You gave them to the synagogue? I didn't know what you did do with tefillin when you no longer wanted or needed them, but surely I thought there would be a religious policy for discarding them overseen by the synagogue. You know the why, he said to me. Sure. 3-4 mornings a week when I could still drive over there, I'd swim, I'd kibitz, I'd watch the card game. And? Well, that's where I went. The why. Go on. I took the tefillin in a paper bag. The locker room was empty. I left in one of the lockers. The halting way he revealed the detail. The bafflement he himself seemed to feel looking back now on this original plot he devised for their disposal prompted me to wait a little before asking anything further. I'm curious, I finally said. How come you didn't go to the rabbi? Ask him to take a look at it. He shrugged, and I realized that he hadn't wanted the rabbi to know what he was up to for fear of what the 23-year-old whom he so respected would think of a Jew who was ditching his tefillin. Or was I wrong about that too? Maybe he never even thought of the rabbi as perhaps the shrug was meant to indicate. Maybe it was just revealed to him in a flash, the knowledge that in that secret place where Jewish men stood unashamedly naked before one another, he could lay his tefillin to rest without worry. The understanding that where his tefillin would come to no harm, where they would not be profaned or desecrated, where they might even be re-sanctified, was in the midst of those familiar Jewish bellies and balls. Perhaps what the act signified was not his shame before the young rabbi in training, but a declaration that the men's locker room at the local YMHA was closer to the core of the Judaism he lived by than the rabbi's study at the synagogue. That nothing would have been more artificial than going with the tefillin to the rabbi, even if the rabbi had been 100 with a beard down to the ground. Yes, the locker room of the Y, where they undressed, they schwitzed, they stank. Whereas men among men, familiar with every nook and cranny of their worn-down, old, ill-shapen bodies, had kibbutz and told their dirty jokes, and where once upon a time they'd made their deals, that was their temple and where they remained Jews. I didn't ask why he hadn't turned it over to me. I didn't ask why, instead of giving back to me all those napkins and tablecloths and placemats, he hadn't given me the tefillin instead. I wouldn't have prayed with them, but I might well have cherished them, especially after his death. But how was he to know that? He probably thought I would have scoffed at the very idea of his handing on his tefillin to me. And 40 years earlier, he would have been right. I didn't ask because I realized that to do so was truly to place the two of us back inside that corny scenario I couldn't seem to cut myself loose from. Somewhat improbably, where his tefillin were concerned, it was I whose imagination kept running to the predictably maudlin, while his had the integrity of a genuinely anomalous talent, compelled by the elemental feeling that can lend ritualistic intensity to even the goofiest act. Well, I said, when it was clear that he had no more to tell me, one of your pals there must have got a big surprise when he came up from the pool. He must have thought a miracle had happened. There he left his shower clogs in the bottom of his locker. And lo and behold, they'd been turned into tefillin. He didn't as much as smile, I guess. Maybe because he didn't get it, or maybe because he did. No, he replied in all seriousness, the locker was empty. When did you do this? in November, a couple days before we went to Florida. So he had more than likely been thinking this: if I die in Florida, if I never come back, know that Philly must not wind up in the garbage. Then, November 30th, he said, we flew to West Palm. I carried my suitcases from the baggage place all the way to the taxi stand. That's how good I felt. And the next morning, my first morning in Florida, I woke up, and this had happened in my sleep. My face, paralyzed. Again, he was pushing the fallen cheek up with his fingertips to see if this time it would stay. I look in the mirror, I see my face, and I knew my life would never be the same. Come here, he said. Come to the bedroom. In the bedroom, where the mahogany bedroom suite no longer gleamed with polish as it had when my mother was in charge of the housekeeping, where instead you could now initial the dust coating the upper surfaces, my father showed me in the middle of the top bureau drawer a little metal box where he kept his will, his insurance policy, and his savings box. There was also a record there of his CDs and municipal. All my papers, he said. And here, the key to my safe deposit box. Okay, I said. I did what you told me, he said. I made all my savings accounts joint with Sandy. He took out the savings books, there were 4 of them, to show me where my brother Sandy's name now appeared beneath his as the account number. Flipping through the savings books, I saw that the savings added up to about $50,000. The CDs and municipals came to another $30,000. They too were to be left to my brother. The $10,000 insurance policy goes to you, he said. I know what you told me, but that I had to do. I wasn't going to leave you nothing. Fine, I said. When I was visiting him in Florida some 2 or 3 years after my mother's death, the subject of his will had come up, and I had told him to leave all his money to Sandy to split as he wished between his 2 kids and himself. I told him that I didn't need any money, and that what Sandy's young sons got could make a big difference to them if the money was divided 2 ways for 3 at the most. I had meant it when I said it, I had confirmed it in a letter to him afterward, and I hadn't thought about his will since. But now, with his death anything but remote, being told by him that he had gone ahead and on the basis of my request substantially eliminated me as one of his heirs, elicited an unforeseen response. I felt repudiated. And the fact that his eliminating me from the will had been my own doing did not at all mitigate this feeling of having been cast out by him. I had made a generous gesture that was also, I suppose, of a piece with the assertions of equality and self-reliance that I had been making to my father since early adolescence. Admittedly, it was also a characteristic attempt to take the moral high ground within the family, to define myself in my 50s, as I had in college and graduate school, and later as a young writer, as a son to whom material considerations were largely negligible. And I felt crushed for having done it. Naive, and foolish, and crushed. To my great dismay, standing with him over his last will and testament, I discovered that I wanted my share of the financial surplus that, against all odds, had been accumulated over a lifetime by this obdurate, resolute father of mine. I wanted the money because it was his money and I was his son and I had a right to my share. And I wanted it because it was, if not an authentic chunk of his hard-working hide, something like the embodiment of all that he had overcome or outlasted. It was what he had to give me. It was what he had wanted to give me. It was due me by custom and tradition. And why couldn't I have kept my mouth shut and allowed what was only natural to prevail? Didn't I think I deserved it? Did I consider my brother and his children more deserving inheritors than I? Perhaps because my brother, by having given him grandchildren, was more legitimately a father's heir than was the son who had been childless? Was I a younger brother who suddenly had become unable to assert his claim against the seniority of someone who had been there first. Or to the contrary, was I a younger brother who felt that he had encroached too much upon an older brother's prerogatives already? Just where had this impulse to cast off my right of inheritance come from? And how? How could it have so easily overwhelmed expectations that I now belatedly discovered a son was entitled to have? During the walk we took that afternoon, in which I steered my father very slowly twice around the block, I was not able to tell him however much I wanted to, and however efficaciously humbling a confession of error might have been, that I would like him to reassign to me the share of his estate that he had originally bequeathed to me in his will. Let it be, I thought, it's almost worth the dough to be able to savor yet again the comedy of your own automatic brand of elevated stupidity. But if it was too late, or for me just too difficult, to lay claim to my original share of the money, I knew what it was I wanted in its place. But I then discovered myself unable to ask for that. Not directly, anyhow. Tell me about Grandpa's shaving mug, I said. I was looking at it in your bathroom. Where was his barbershop? Do you remember? I had spotted the shaving mug that had once been my grandfather's in my father's bathroom the previous morning when I come over to tell him about the tumor. In it, my father kept his razor and a tube of shaving cream. The mug was pale blue porcelain. A delicate floral design enclosed a wide white panel at the front, and inside the panel the name S. Roth and the date 1912 were inscribed in faded gold Gothic lettering. The mug was our one family heirloom, as far as I knew. Aside from a handful of antique snapshots, the only thing tangible that anyone had cared to save from the immigrant years of Newark. I had been intrigued by it ever since my grandfather had died a month short of my 7th birthday, and it made its way into our Newark bathroom back when my father was still shaving with a bristle brush and shaving soap. Senator Roth, my grandfather, had been a remote, mysterious presence to me as a small boy, an elongated man with an undersized head, the forebear whom my own skeleton most resembled, and about whom all I knew was that he smoked all day long, spoke only Yiddish, and wasn't much given to fondling the American grandchildren when we all showed up with our parents on Sunday. After his death, the shaving mug in our bathroom brought him much more fully to life for me. Not as a grandfather, but even more interestingly then, as an ordinary man among men, a customer of a barber shop, where his mug was kept on a shelf with the mugs of the other neighborhood immigrants. It reassured me as a child to think that in that household, where according to all reports there was never a penny to spare, a dime was set aside every week for him to go to the barber shop and get his Sabbath shave. The shaving mug inscribed S. Roth had seemed to free my grandfather, if only momentarily, if only for those few minutes he quietly sat being shaved in the barber's chair late on a Friday afternoon, from the dour exigencies that had trapped him and that I imagined accounted for his austere, uncommunicative nature. His mug emitted the aura of an archaeological find, an artifact signaling an unexpected level of cultural refinement, an astonishing superfluity in an otherwise cramped and obstructed existence. In our ordinary little Newark bathroom, it had the impact on me of a Greek vase depicting the mythic origins of the race. Tell me about Grandpa's shaving mug, I said, as we walked together slowly down the street. His barbershop, do you remember it? Of course I remember. Bank Street, below Wallace Place, where the German hospital used to be on the corner of Wallace Place and Bank Street. There was a barber on Bank Street, and when I was a little boy, we used to go around and get my hair cut, and my father would get a shave. The mug had S. Roth and a, what do you call it, a date, and they kept it for him in his barber shop. How'd you come to get it? How did I get it? That's a good question. Don't think I did? No, I didn't. I took it from my brother Ed. Yes, when we moved from Rutgers Street, Pop took it with him to Huntington Street, I went to the barber on Johnson Avenue and Avon Avenue, and then Ed took it after Pop died, and I took it from him. I think it was the only thing that was ever left. And it wasn't even left to me. I took it. You wanted it, I said. I wanted it, he told me with a laugh, since I was a little boy. Want to know something I said? I did too. I used to go get a shave with Bill Eisenstadt, he should rest in peace. Remember Bill? Of course. Bill and Lil and their son, Howie. Barber on Clinton Place, right around the corner from the high school. Cost a quarter. We leave it to Bill to find the last quarter shave in there. From Bill Eisenstadt, he went on to invoke Abe Block and Max Feld and Sam Kay and Jan Cohen, the totemic male figures out of my earliest childhood. Insurance men with him at the Metropolitan. Pinochle players in our kitchen on Friday nights. Companions with their wives and kids on the Memorial Day picnics up at the South Mountain Reservation. The veteran foot soldiers with whom he had gone out collecting door to door in Newark's most impoverished neighborhoods. There would be families, he now told me, still paying premiums 20, 30 years after the death of the insured. 3 cents a week, that's what we collected. How come they kept paying? They never said anything to the agent. Somebody died, and they never mentioned it. The insurance man came around, and they paid him. Amazing. That's it. Though it was by no means the first time that I was hearing his stories of the long evenings collecting pennies from Newark's poor. Stories from 38 years with the Metropolitan with Bill, Abe, and Sam, and Jan Cohen. All of them, as he reminded me several times, long gone. And of the few friends alive, there wasn't much good news to report either. Louis Chesler is in a hospital pissing blood. Ida Singer is almost blind. Milton Singer can't walk, he's in a wheelchair. Turo, remember Dick Turo? He has cancer, poor guy. Bill Weber doesn't even know who I am when I call him. Herman? Herman who? I don't know any Herman. Thus he managed not to dwell entirely on his tumor, speaking instead of the old dead, the dying, and those of his friends who would have been better off.